Okay, welcome back to the Adventure Within channel. My name is Andrew Fritz. I'm a clairvoyant, healer, and meditation teacher. And today we have an interview with Barbara Whiff. She's an international peace activist, award-winning author, and psychic channel with over 35 years of experience in the intuitive arts. As a co-founder of Conflict Revolution, she offers a unique approach to resolving inner conflicts as a pathway to personal, family, community, and global peace inspired by her channeling of Albert Einstein. Her acclaimed books, including Imagining Einstein, Essays on M-Theory, World Peace and the Science of Compassion, have earned prestigious awards, and her presentations on Einstein's unified field theory and the science of compassion continue to inspire audiences all around the world. Barbara leads Conflict Revolution workshops and is currently spearheading a world peace tour advocating for the willing to participate in a worldwide nonviolent action to end the age of war. Okay, welcome to the show, Barbara.
Hey, Andrew, thanks for having me. Looking forward to chatting.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Glad to have you here. Before we get into spirituality and mediumship, I know that you're a musician and had a career as a musician kind of prior to maybe getting into the mediumship. Can you talk about that, just being a musician?
Oh, gosh, yes. I started teaching myself piano when I was about 5
Oh, wow.
and writing songs when I was 12 or 13. And by the time I got out of high school, which was in 1972,
Hmm.
I had 2 full sets of music, and it was that era, back when music had eras.
Uh-huh, yeah.
Like it was the singer-songwriter era,
Hmm.
and then it moved into this era. But so yeah, that was, and as long as I was alive, since I was that high, I had a hairbrush
Hmm.
and I was going to be a rock star. So that was my thing. And I went out on the road for about 20 years, 15, 20 years.
Oh, wow.
And
Very cool.
yeah, and got to be, I was world famous in Minneapolis. But,
Nice.
I wouldn't have traded any of those moments on the road for anything. And some of them were pretty hard as
Yeah.
as a solo woman in that era,
Ah, right.
you know.
Hmm. Could you talk about your just your time traveling the country? Is there anything that stands out, just whether your travel adventures or anything with the music or doing shows? Anything that stands out you want to share from that?
Well, that was such a young time. I
Mm,
mean, I just got out of high school and I was gone and on the road.
sure.
And it was that time where I think I should have, I didn't want to go to college. I didn't want to get a job. I wanted to be a
Mm,
rock star. And so I
right.
did and went and made it happen. And because of that, I mean, I played in the middle of Iowa as a soloist. I've
Mm,
opened for Tower of Power and Tom Waits, and
okay.
I've had duos and trios and rock bands and everything in between, wedding bands. I played at biker bars and
Uh,
gay everywhere you want. And
yeah, yeah.
it's so rich. It's just I'm really, really blessed to have all that experience.
That's so cool. Yeah. Um, and then to kind of bridge things, do you find what's in your kind of from your perspective, what's the relationship between maybe art and music and the mystical arts, mysticism?
Well, it's the same place
Mm,
that I go when I write a song.
mm,
I
hmm.
I describe it as going into outer space, quote unquote, and listening for the song that's already written,
Hmm.
and then bringing it through, like, measure by measure,
Yeah.
beat by beat, melody by melody. And so it's the same process of being a medium. You go into this outer spacey type of place
Uh-huh.
that's a lot, I think, like, if we're being practical, dissociation.
Mm,
And I think that's why a lot of artists who have been traumatized are good artists, because you get to that place that's so, it's just tactile. It's like pure emotion.
hmm.
And you're just listening for different things
Mm,
when you're a medium as opposed to a musician.
right. And in that experience, you kind of, reaching out in the cosmos, do you sense yourself? Can you share what that experience is for you? Like, do you feel yourself kind of out of the body to some degree, or just putting your attention somewhere else that you can reach to and bring down here and kind of manifest? Or
Well, yes, and I think it started out like I said, in a more traumatized way. You know, when you're a
I
child and you're
Sure.
traumatized, you dissociate.
Right.
And yet I have always thought that that condition, as unfortunate as it was, is what put me in that sort of dissociated place.
I see.
And I had a lot of challenges just in the practical world, but in terms of creativity and, I mean, I was incredibly prolific at writing music and because of it. So it is a little crazy making.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like there's always a fine line with the arts and spirituality where some people get judged or labeled as crazy in some kind of way, but then on the other side of the spectrum, some people, praised and admired and looked up to, and it's a weird, interesting fine line that we can kind of dance in both these worlds. So,
And I think some of it has to do with what is your intention. So for like
mm,
with me and music, my intention was I had these songs that I didn't write to try to sell.
mm,
These were my art, and
mm,
they're good, they're amazing songs. And I wanted to be true to that. And other people wanted to have a bigger popularity
mm,
and, have a just a more general relationship to music and were willing to, compromise themselves because they didn't have that kind of, and not that one is better than the other. In
sure.
fact, I often have been a bit envious of the people who
Mm.
actually are crowd pleasers.
Oh, I
You
see.
know,
Right.
I have some very deep music that probably didn't belong in a bar
Ah, mm-hmm.
sometimes, but here I am, and
Yeah,
so yeah, I think it's all your relationship to what you're doing.
got it. And one last thing, did you find that through just through the music and the art, did you find that healing in a similar way to kind of transitioning into, I imagine, spirituality and mediumship and psychic work? Did you find the music healing in a
Yeah,
similar, different?
absolutely. In fact, I often said that I wrote because if I didn't write, I don't think I would be on the planet. I just
Mm,
had so much emotion and so much verbiage and
hmm.
apparently so much music in
Yeah.
me that if it just hurt if I didn't get it out of me. And I think it kept me alive a lot. And also, if you
Mm,
think about singing, it's just constant breathing.
mm.
And I didn't equate it at the time, like to breath work in a spiritual sense, but
All right.
I'm sure that was very helpful in helping me stay grounded through
Mm.
some difficult times.
Yeah, yeah. I can understand that. Um, yeah, could then I know you do mediumship. Could you maybe talk about how did you get into that? How were you introduced to that? And then maybe just for some people that might not even know what channeling is or mediumship is, can you maybe describe what that is for people?
Yeah, and they go side by side, the music and the mediumship.
Hmm.
And how I was introduced to it was a friend of mine's mom
Mm,
was a psychic. I was like 16 in high school, and he said, "You have to come see what my mom does." So I
mm,
wasn't looking for something, and it's like, "What does your mom do?" And she would close her eyes and she'd light a candle. She had this beautiful picture of Jesus behind her.
hmm.
And then she would talk in the voice of we. we
Ah,
we see that you're blah blah blah, and she would describe my emotional psychological condition
mm,
to a T, like she'd been in my head. Like,
ah,
we know you're going through this anxiety of blah 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 blah, and it'd be like, oh my gosh, how does she know all that about me?
right.
So a lot of her work with me over 10 years from that time, I'd go and have readings with her, was about the music.
Mm,
She was helping me to achieve this dream I had to be this international singing sensation. And it was working. I mean, I was winning awards and, getting well known and on the road. And yet I was so sick inside
mm,
that I couldn't quite keep up the lifestyle anymore. And, I'm coming out of the 70s and the 80s. And
mm. Yep.
um, so, so that they kind of were intertwining. As she
Hmm.
described, you're going to be singing and you're doing your healing music.
Hmm.
And when I finally came in off the road, just a little too much, lifestyle,
Sure.
is when I started to spontaneously write
Mm,
and channel. one day. I was writing a letter, and suddenly my hands became sort of independent as my thinking,
Mm.
because I was writing a letter. I was very angry at a friend of mine.
Mm.
And suddenly I was saying some really profound, deep things that I hadn't thought of before they came out of my thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's so bad to make judgments. And suddenly it was because when you make judgments, like the lens of an eye, you
Mm.
close down all you see is just a little tiny bit of the whole picture.
Yeah.
And I was like, so
Where'd that come from?
who, who are you? Because Eunice, my mentor, she
Mm.
was just an antenna.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't angels or dead people or anybody. And that's how I thought of myself.
Mm.
And I was picking up your higher power and just talking back like I was singing or, doing a solo. And so I said, who are you? And they said, we're sound.
Mm.
And somehow, even when I say it now, sound, it resonated because I've been in sound since I was 5 years old, of
Right.
course. It was comforting and fine. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And they went on to reframe my whole life. Like you were in those bars and you were drinking and your ego was all deflated because people weren't taking you seriously and you were drinking but your music was still doing what it was meant to do.
Mm.
Even though you didn't think it because you thought you had to be the star, you were
Right.
still delivering what we said. It was like, so that was a big turning point of how it started to kind of pull me away from, didn't immediately, because I'm
Mm-hmm.
still going, to be a rock star.
Sure.
But this was way too fascinating. And I started to do it for friends. And then one thing led to another. And I started to speak like
Mm.
my mentor did and became kind of one of a few psychics in Minneapolis
Mm-hmm.
who worked on a regular basis.
That's so cool. And the first time you got a reading from this person, were you did it catch you off guard? Was it were you were like excited or like what was that? How did you feel like receiving that information for the first time or having a reading for the first time?
It was it left me speechless
Mm.
and with a lot of questions,
Mm.
because one of the things that she said, among other things, that I was going to be this, international sensation, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
was that I was going to oh, here, I forgot what what she had told me. Um anyway, so she was weaving in the actual life
Mm.
and helping me achieve that.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things she told me was about a past life. That was it.
Ah.
And she said she just described all of the details of it without telling me any names. The
Mm-hmm.
woman was a painter at the turn, like she went through World War I and World War II. She used to sit up in the trees and paint the strife of the people at the time. She was married to a man in service of the people.
Mm.
So there were all these kinds of clues.
Mm-hmm.
And in my first reading, I left her apartment and walked around going, what does that even mean? Because she said, you're going to find your paintings.
Mm.
You're going to find out who you were and you're going to see your paintings.
Oh, okay.
And I and for probably 6 years, I didn't think to like research it. I always thought, well, okay, if it's that going to be, then it'll just be there.
Right.
And one day I was at a party. I was dating this man. I didn't know a soul at this party. And I was
Mm-hmm.
sitting by myself in the library. And the hostess came in and handed me a book and said, I think you'll like this book.
Mm.
And it was a woman named Katha Kolitz,
Mm.
who was a German painter. And on the cover was a picture that looked exactly like a picture I'd drawn when I was like 15
Mm.
of maybe Keith Richards,
Mm-hmm.
with a shadowy pencil stuff.
Yeah.
And only she was doing a self-portrait, which was something I always did too.
Ah.
And that turned out to be her.
Oh, wow.
And even now I have she had very different styles. Like she
Hmm.
had this kind of hard edge thing style and then this softer thing. And my drawings from that time, I have them on display next to the different ones like
Yeah.
she, and so it's so fascinating. And I don't know, how does that work?
Right. That's so cool to be able to kind of make those connections from really the past to here. Um, that's so cool because I feel like that probably happens, in people's lives. They might not just actually recognize it all the time. So being able to like actually experience it and recognize it, hey, this is from a past life, and knowing that, that is so cool. Um, and then so okay, so you had that spontaneous kind of sounds like automatic writing kind of experience channeling. Where did it go from there? I know it sounds like you're working with her and kind of developing maybe this ability. Where did it go from there then?
Well, I did two readings for two of my friends
Hmm.
as a gift. And I said, if this means anything or is valuable and you think somebody else could use it. And I
Hmm.
started out charging $25
Hmm.
and people would come over to my house and I'd write
Hmm.
and they would sit on my side and I'd write. And through that, I started to get so many people that I thought, okay, now I have to start to talk like Eunice did.
Hmm.
But that's kind of scary.
Right.
There's more reality to it, but I did it. And then I started to just constantly get referrals.
Hmm.
I never advertised. People would just do word of mouth. And
Hmm.
after about, well, it was 93. So it was about 6 years, I built up a clientele and I thought, I want to do a group channel.
Hmm.
Like, what would these voices of we say to a group of people?
Hmm.
And, Abraham Hicks and all kinds of people channeling groups.
Hmm.
But I couldn't find anybody in my circle who were interested, which kind of surprised me. But
Hmm.
then came Teresa on a referral, and she sent six of her best girlfriends. And then came Kim.
Hmm.
And long story short, the psychic sorority was born. Kim and Teresa and I
Hmm.
started doing groups in December 93.
Hmm.
We did our first group, not having any idea what was going to happen. We had no expectation. It's like, let's find out. No, let's just get together and see what these voices, because nobody had ever like sat with me and said, hey, here's what your reading said. What
Hmm.
does that mean?
Right.
People would just come and get their reading, and that was fine with me. But these women suddenly wanted to know, what did this mean?
Hmm.
So I had the same thought that at the same time they had when they were going, hey, maybe we could get the girls together and ask Barb to come. And I was like, oh my gosh, here's my group.
Hmm.
So that was the beginning of the clear steering way far away from the musical pathway
Yeah.
and into a process that it continues to this day, this mission that they started.
Yeah. And then I'm sure there's similarities and differences with people that channel and do mediumship, their experiences. Um, I guess what is your experience? Do you sense that you kind of move away and something else comes in? Do you feel very conscious or there's an unconscious or a bit of both? Like what is your experience in that process like, kind of bringing something in or letting something speak through you?
If I look over the course of the whole of it, it started out being, like I said, this antenna
Hmm.
where it just sort of felt like I was making stuff up.
Mm, right.
I mean, I didn't feel like there was anybody in me or I was channeling anybody. It was just like I knew stuff and people would go, how'd you know that? It's like, I don't know. I speak and the truth somehow, whatever it is to you.
Hmm.
And so it's when the girl said in a channeling session, who are you? And the answer was angels.
Mm,
And that was new. And then I had to adapt to, what does that mean? That I'm quote unquote channeling angels. How does that work?
hmm.
And the three of us talked about it. and decided that because whatever they were telling us was so miraculous, it was changing our lives so quickly and so profoundly
Mm.
that we didn't care who it was. We
Mm.
used to say it could be the Easter Bunny. We don't care. But it still felt the same
Hmm.
as if I was an antenna.
Got it.
And there was this, even with angels and sound and an antenna, there was this heavy kind of accent
Mm.
in the channeling that I never could replicate when I wasn't channeling.
Hmm.
It was just this weird sort of affectation of however I personally channeled.
Hmm.
And I think everybody has their own very specific way. And I always encourage people to be unique in
Hmm.
how you use your intuitive art
Hmm.
because, I like, yeah, you can channel like I do. If you want to channel Einstein, I think he's there for the communication to anybody who wants to.
Right.
But maybe there's a different way, including like you're talking about the cross section of arts and the intuitive arts.
Hmm.
I think music, art, all of that is channeling and expression.
Hmm.
So I love when people want to, do it their way.
Right. I agree with that. It sounds like with the psychic sorority, it sounds like you started getting more answers of what was happening. Does that seem accurate with the mediumship
Yes.
and the channel? Yeah, got it.
Yeah. And they had a very specific agenda that they told us right off the bat.
Mm.
They said, we have a theory of how you resolve conflict as humans
Mm.
within you that is revolutionary, the byproduct will be world peace.
Mm.
But we need humans to test it on actual conflicts.
Mm.
And so
Okay.
the three of us who were so deep into it anyway, we're like, yeah, sure, we'll do it. And
Mm.
then, of course, we had to start to fight and have conflict. And
Ah.
it was a whole different research channel. There's channeling,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's what's the channeling telling you to do?
Mm-hmm.
And then are you doing it?
Right.
And a lot of people like to just sit and listen and feel good and imagine, but
Right.
we had to really put it to the test. And that's what eventually became what I now teach all over the world is conflict revolution.
Ah. Okay. Yeah, that is one of my questions. I do want to ask that here in a little bit and go deeper with that. But you just mentioned something I think that's really important is the paying attention, to the intuition, and then there's like also the actual taking action and following through, and those are two very different things. Um, do you find with your own self or just people you've worked with that transition sometimes is tricky, being able to have enough certainty or trust where you're like, okay, finally, I'll just go with this message that's coming to me, whether it's from themselves or some other like an angel. Is that something you notice that's kind of a tricky dance to kind of get to following through with that?
It is. And I think it's the challenge of our times because
Mm.
so many of us can understand things. And Einstein used to say it'd be like going to the library and reading about how to fly a plane. Well, a
Mm.
lot of us can read. We can even set up the little fake, the thing. But that's a
Yeah.
way different body experience than walking out onto the tarmac and getting into the plane
Right.
and taking it up. So that is the challenge. And I think the angels and the party and Einstein and whoever I've been working with that is the question of the hour. It's not how to have world peace.
Mm.
We know the steps to take.
Hmm.
It's how to inspire people to take the steps.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. You mentioned Albert Einstein. How did that come about? Working with that energy and consciousness. Was that spontaneous initially? Was it intentional? Like, how did that kind of come about for you?
Well, it kind of was a God thing because
Mm.
after we published Diaries of a Psychic Sorority,
Hmm.
I had a literary agent in New York who had got a call from a metaphysical tabloid in London. This is
Mm.
1998.
Hmm.
And they were looking for an interview with Princess Di from Beyond the Grave on the 1 year anniversary of her death.
Hmm.
And this was another moment in my life where I went, what? I this is not this was not my intention to use my intuitive arts to, shag down famous dead people.
Right.
Paparazzi. Hey.
Yeah, yeah.
But I thought, okay, well, all right, well, I'll just see. So I channeled typing. I typed the questions and the answers
Mm,
and printed it off and read it and wept
mm,
because it was so detailed and profound, and you can hear her voice when you read it. And then the whole at the end was, if everybody who put flowers in front of the palace did conflict revolution, we'd have world peace in a day.
mm.
And the tabloid flew me out to New York and spent 5 hours with me, but they didn't want it. I suppose because there wasn't enough dirt in it of, you know.
Uh, got it. Yeah, the drama.
And of course, she didn't mention either Charles or Camilla once in any of it. So they were disappointed. But my
Mm,
my agent and I said, hey, well, maybe there's some more famous dead people, and we made this list.
mm-hmm,
And I'd imagine going to them and
mm-hmm,
asking them, and some would say yes and some would say no. And we went through Nicole Brown Simpson, who was
mm,
OJ's dead
mm-hmm.
wife, who had just been murdered a year before too.
Yeah.
And we got to RFK,
Mm,
which to this day is a fascinating interview. But that's when he said, look, this wasn't your idea. There's a bunch of us here working in afterlife for world peace,
mm-hmm,
trying to help you, and we'll tell you who's coming up next.
mm,
And so they started to give us, Anwar Sadat,
mm,
who was also somebody involved in 20th century. Freud. I mean,
mm-hmm.
we didn't even have Einstein on our list.
Interesting.
We didn't. And I think that's why they just took a halt to it. Said, here. And when I did Albert Einstein, I spoke.
Mm.
It was the voice of all of my readings.
Oh, okay. So that, yeah, the
It
light
was
really
the voice of sound.
interesting. Okay,
And
so
that
that,
took a couple years. That took a couple years to digest,
right.
literally.
Wow, yeah, okay. So that had been an important moment to kind of have that realization and then like kind of like, okay, what is process all that. Um, and then that
Well, you
kind of,
sound crazy. You sound crazy.
yeah, that's I mentioned that earlier. I mean, is that something, that's something I've handled, that I'm sure a lot of other people that are into the arts or even just anything spiritual related, psychic stuff, you do hit that judgment or that energy invalidation of, oh, you're crazy or something's off with you. Um, is that something that you've felt or handled, just through this process? And how did you deal with that? Or maybe you've seen other people work through that.
I think there's a good tendency if you're really visionary, like I apparently am. I mean, I didn't
Yeah.
think of myself that way, is the self-doubt
Mm,
and the fear of being called crazy. It's it's part of I call it healthy skepticism.
mm-hmm,
I think we all should be healthily skeptical of life because
mm-hmm,
truth will outlast skepticism. That's what it's
mm,
for, to weed out the truth.
mm-hmm,
So for me to be skeptical of it, but at the same time, totally like absorbed in what was happening. Like I wasn't so skeptical that I wasn't going to talk to these party of 12,
right.
it's like, but I kept it undercover, like a secret society.
Mm-hmm,
And that was 98. And it was only in December of 2001, after 9/11.
mm,
When 9/11 happened, I had just published Party of 12, the Afterlife interviews, in June of 2001.
mm,
And then that happened. And then I had to take some time to go, I have this incredible body of knowledge and these people in afterlife, even if I'm crazy,
mm,
I'm pretty whatever plugged in to make all this up. It's
mm,
just so dense.
mm-hmm,
And I had a reading in my living room. There's about 35 people, and
mm,
finally just came out and said, look, it's Einstein, it's Anwar Sadat, it's John F. Kennedy. And we had an incredible 2.5 hour session, and people were asking, like asking John Kennedy, like, how do we approach George W. Bush?
mm.
what kind of, how should we think about this? What's going on? And so it was really helpful to
Mm,
do that. But when I really came out of the closet about Einstein was in 2007 when I did an event
mm,
with the Crimson Circle, he's a channeler, Jeffrey Hoppy, and he
mm.
invited me to this massive event. And I was kind of apologetic, like, okay, I'm not trying to convince you it really is Einstein, but just listen to what he has to say, and then you can decide. And they all just wagged their finger at me. Don't you dare say that's not Einstein.
Mm.
That's Einstein. That's Einstein. So that was very helpful. But it
Yeah.
does take time. And okay, so mine's a bigger kind of stage,
Yeah.
but even just, people learning how to trust their own intuition,
Hmm.
it can be crazy making because it's going to tell you to do stuff that your intellect is going to say, no, no, no.
Right.
And because your intellect is the one that actually sends the signal to your hand to turn left,
Hmm.
it's not intuition in your heart. It'll impel you, but intellect is the one. It can say no to your intellect.
Hmm.
So it's a struggle no matter what macrocosm you're dealing with.
Yeah. I imagine that was kind of scary but liberating, kind of like quote unquote coming out of the closet, where it's like, wow, this is kind of scary, but it's like, this feels. Well, did it feel liberating or kind of freeing at the same time? I imagine.
Well, it did. And especially because in 2005, I decided after Party of 12, I decided, I just want to do a book just for Einstein.
Mm.
Because once I channeled him and knew that this was my voice, it was like, oh my gosh, like my old friend.
Hmm.
And I had no idea what was going to be said. It's like, we'll just do a little book for Einstein. Well, that was when he delivered his unified field theory
Hmm.
with what he called the map of human consciousness, which explains how human consciousnness works with energy to create the physical world,
Hmm.
and a scientific, quantifiable definition of compassion
Mm.
as the first fundamental force of the universe,
Mm.
the intelligence that uses the other four fundamental forces to impel the creation of the physical world one step at a time.
Mm.
And I just ever wanted to be a rock star. I mean, science was not my deal. And he said, the source is in the center of the earth, literally, and it operates like a black hole.
Mm.
So that was another moment where I had to step back and go, I know nothing. I don't know if this sounds just like stupid gibberish that some scientist would say,
Mm.
what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And I struggled with it, although it was completely made sense in my body,
Hmm.
like this idea of compassion and how he went on to describe how it affects and how it uses it. And it's just this brilliant thing. But I, I just don't know if it's even viable.
Hmm.
And so I was given the opportunity to, very early on after I published that book, I was appearing at, it was called a metaphysical meetup.
Hmm.
Meetup?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you
Yep.
have real meetings, and it was in Philly. And I walked in, and it was like amateur physicists and amateur chemists.
Oh, okay.
And they were all talking chemistry and physics. And I was sitting there thinking, oh my God, they're going to think I know something, like I know science. I don't.
Right.
And finally, somebody in the back yelled, let her speak. And I got up there and I did my sort of like, okay, I'm not trying to convince you it's Einstein, but will you tell me what you think of this unified field theory?
Hmm.
And when I was all done, they were just like, the physicist was like, wait a minute, you're starting with a 0 point gravity field, and then you're marrying it sort of to the blah 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 and the blah blah blah, and then it's combining blah blah blah. I was like, I don't know, maybe. Like, okay. So that was also a very like confirming. Didn't do everything it needed to, but it made me go, okay, all right, I'm kind of onto something.
How was it received by them? The people that you were, the scientists and all that. How did they take that information, or what was their response
They
to
were
all that?
just jazzed. The
Oh wow.
chemist, he was like, oh, so you're saying the old model is where we have six blah, blah, blahs, and they move from here to here to here. What you're saying, there's actually nine blah, blah, blahs. And I'm like, how are you getting this
Mm.
from what I've just presented? See,
Yeah.
and that's what as I started to train this all over the world, and I'd see people have this response to it. Like, it's so rudimental
Hmm.
that it boils up into whatever your doing. Like the chemist, it inspires this opening of their chemistry, whatever,
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that's similar to a lot of like psychic readings. Sometimes the person giving it is like, I don't even know what this really means completely, but I hope the people that's on the receiving end understand this. So,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah.
You get it in your body, it's
Yeah.
something past just thinking.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier the conflict revolution. Most people, when they think of that phrase, they initially hear conflict resolution, but it's for you, you've coined it the conflict revolution, which I like. Can you describe what that is, and is there any part of that have to do with the like people doing their own personal inner work that contributes to the greater shift in humanity? Is that kind of what it's about,
Yes,
or yeah?
absolutely. It's the very simple process that the angels taught us and Einstein parboiled down. And it's based on that we have what we call these three human dimensions:
Mm-hmm.
intellect in the head, intuition in the heart, and emotion in the solar plexus. And
Mm,
these three dimensions are like our spiritual organs.
mm,
And just like your heart, you treat differently than your stomach.
sure.
Each has their own function, and
Mm-hmm.
they work together as a triad
Mm-hmm.
to create our physical experience. And
Mm,
the way we master it with conflict revolution is we develop this witness. I think that's a pretty common
mm-hmm.
thing to be able to watch yourself. But what
Sure.
we want to do is we're looking to align, we call it aligning to compassion.
Mm,
And that's where our operating system, all of our emotion, all of them are
mm,
flowing up, not just the good ones, not just the nice ones.
right.
And they're informing intuition,
Mm,
which is always going to tell us the next most advantageous step to take for the good of the whole situation. Of course, that only intuition, right, can see.
yeah, yeah.
And then it moves up into intellect. And this Einstein says this is the point where all conflict begins to manifest in the world because intuition will tell you rest.
Mm,
Simple, like a small impelling statement.
yeah.
An intellect where ego is control, has free will say, no, I can't rest. I've got these things to do. And then it decides to go off and do those things. And then that's when the system is not aligned.
Mm, got
And
it.
that's when, and in the bigger unified field theory, if we're in the center of the earth with our compilation of our consciousness, we're kind of shining our light up into this lens in the physical world where we're
Mm-hmm.
separate. And whatever's on that wave from the center of the earth to the surface in our bodies, these three human dimensions, whatever this condition is, it's perfectly going to manifest in the lens.
Mm,
So if we're conflicted here, it's perfectly going to manifest as conflict.
right, right. That almost sounds like having to, the intuition happens and then having to somehow quiet the intellect so you can really bring out the intuition more. Because sometimes it seems like that could be, the intellect could be very noisy, but the intuition's just this quiet, kind of brief, direct, simple thing. And being able to quiet that, is that something that's a part of that or something you've noticed for yourself or?
Yeah, because as you get to know these parts of yourself, and this is what we help people learn how to do. It's very simple. You don't need us, just wake up in the morning, go, okay, I'm going to watch myself.
Mm,
What am I feeling? What does it feel like here? What is this? Um, and then what does intuition feel like? It's like people got to get to know what is that impelling outside of the all that thinking, right?
yeah.
Because all of that thought process, now we have to remember, is what's creating the glass and the
Mm,
computer. There's this
mm,
part of our intellectual functioning in the subatomic going, that is a glass, that is a glass, that is a glass, that is a glass. And it's, we're projecting the glass.
mm,
So in conflict revolution, when we're aligned, our intellect is doing what it should be doing, which is looking at the splendid, magnificent manifestation of the miracle of present moment creation that's happening as all of this is going on. Our bodies are being created and we're projecting or we're perceiving
mm,
while it's listening for that divine feminine. Okay, turn left, just turns left.
right.
But that fight, yeah, that's where all the conflict is.
That's funny. And do you feel like that's kind of where we're all headed is being able to just instead of get caught up in the intellect, being able to just, oh, here I got this message and just go with it. Don't question it, don't doubt it, just go with it and let it unfold.
I can say definitively, well, so 93, however long it's been, 32 years of intense study of this, that yes, my life has transformed into something where not that I'm perfect, not that I still don't have deep emotion, not that I, don't have panic attacks, but
Sure.
I know what to do. I know how to channel my emotion without letting it marry to any thought.
Right.
I just want it to move. And I know when I get triggered by somebody and I have a little story about them, you know,
Right.
yeah, that's for me.
Mm.
That's my cue to observe and witness. Okay, if I'm so triggered by them being disrespectful,
Mm.
where am I not respecting myself, somebody else?
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's why it's a revolution, because you rotate your perspective off the person that's 180 degrees and bring it back 360 to yourself.
Okay. Yeah, that makes it's like a mirroring effect. Like what you see something or you're noticing something out there, and then you're going, okay, wait, what's happening within myself in that moment, and being able to resolve or work through that. Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah, and it's easy because not easy, it's hard to do, but it's easy to know because if you have an emotional trigger, and the angels taught us this very early on
Mm.
in the book, is when you get triggered, and they said it's like, pouring salt in a wound.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a sign you're about to get a gift.
Ah.
So it's when you're triggered, then your part of the conflict is within you.
Mm-hmm.
And the easiest way and this was the course through research and channeling and learning, is that when we can identify what that is in somebody else, because
Mm.
we usually can,
Right.
well, she's so
Huh.
this and she's so that,
Yeah.
and then bring that back to ourselves
Mm.
and say, okay, where am I perpetrating that very thing I'm projecting onto her? And I'm telling you, 100% of the time when I do the process
Mm-hmm.
and I get that aha moment, we call it hanging and dang.
Mm.
Because you find that
Oh.
moment and you go, oh dang, it's me.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yeah. And then magically, mystically, miraculously, that conflict changes in a
Mm.
way that you can't do it if you go right, like Einstein said, you go right at the level of where it's being created.
Mm.
It has an influence. And so people either rise to the occasion or they disappear.
Mm.
And it's so interesting. I had a conflict I called the drunken marketing manager. And my soundbite was, she makes me do her work and then she criticizes me for it. Like I
Mm.
wasn't even supposed to be working for her, but I was overachieving, and she was criticizing me.
Mm.
That had to do with my husband at the
Mm.
time. When it took me a couple of weeks of going, I don't do that. I would never
Mm.
make somebody do my work and then criticize them for it.
Yeah.
And I finally called Teresa, and without missing a beat,
Uh,
remember the time, when your husband took care of everything and blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, dang.
mm.
And so I was able to go to him and have a deeper healing moment that we maybe never would have had at that
Mm.
time. But it was so wonderful and healing for us. And the next day I went to work and she was fired.
Mm.
And I didn't,
Interesting.
that wasn't my intention. I
Yeah.
wasn't doing the work to get her fired. It's like, I just know that when I do it,
Things
some,
shift.
yeah, something shifts like that in this little magical kind of miraculous way.
Yeah. Like the energy's transforming. Um, yeah, it almost sounds like all those moments where we do feel triggered. It seems like these wonderful, it seems, well, usually it doesn't feel that great. At least in my experiences, it happens all the time, right? But it's a moment to heal or discover something, it seems. It's an opportunity instead of it's something negative, really. Um, but like you said,
Yeah. And
not always easy.
over time, so no, but over time in doing it, we become more detached from being tossed and turned by all these relationships and
Mm,
all people and everything going on around us because it's so triggering just living in the world.
sure.
But as we learn to live in and of, in the world, but not of it, this
Yeah.
is kind of a way to train yourself to do that. Well, it is a
Mm,
way. And but yeah, it's the hardest work of our life, but it's
Yeah.
the most liberating, and it puts at our fingertips a little more power of intention.
Hmm. It almost, I don't know, maybe if you share the same thought or not, but it almost seems like this is like the real work that we're here to do. Even though not everyone might be ready or prepared for it. I mean, it seems like a lot more people on the planet are, but it seems like we can get so hypnotized by the things in the world and caught up in whatever's in the world. But it seems like this is kind of almost like the real, true work we're all after to learn or heal. Like it seems like this is the work we're after essentially. So,
I just don't think there's any other choice.
right.
I mean, where we are today in the world.
Right.
And what's interesting too is that Einstein, this is the 70th anniversary of his last manifesto,
Mm,
which was read in London on July 9th, 1955, after he died.
mm,
And the basic premise was, world leaders, you need to resolve conflict because no one will survive World War III.
mm-hmm,
And those were his actual last words to the world. And in on July 8th, 2025, I'll be speaking to the scientists at
mm.
the Science of Consciousness conference in Barcelona,
Oh, well, okay.
where after all of these years, I get to address the scientists. All of these scientists are the top. They're looking for the unified field theory, and I get to
Mm.
present to them. I've got
Oh,
20
wow.
minutes. And I was at it last year. I just had a little tiny little corner piece, but
Yeah.
I left that conference last year going, yeah, this is really what it is. And as time has gone on, it's gotten more prevalent. Like Brian Greene, he's a string theorist.
Mm-hmm.
And he just came out with his statement about, yes, the source is in the center of the planet and it operates like a black hole.
Hmm. Interesting.
So I was like, okay, I'm okay. It's only been, however many years, 20 years, but I'm okay with it.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like with the science is always kind of playing catch up, and then you feel, oh, okay, finally, here we go.
Right.
Yeah. Will you think that will be recorded in any kind of way that might be shared off in the future sometime or?
Well, I'm hoping I have a videographer going to Barcelona with me
Oh,
for
okay.
the week, but
Yeah.
I was told by the conference that they don't allow anybody
Uh,
to film, but there is a live stream
oh,
that
okay.
it's a you can live stream the whole it's a whole week long conference on
Oh,
consciousness,
oh, cool.
and
Okay.
it's the science of consciousness, and it's put on by the University of Arizona Tucson.
Oh, okay.
And so this is their 31st year, and I'm just floored. In fact, I'm going to ask when I'm having my presentation if there's any mathematicians, what are the odds that I would be delivering Einstein's message from beyond the grave on the
Ah.
70th anniversary, the very almost to the day
hmm
of his last manifesto. So I'm very excited.
Very cool. Yeah, that's like very exciting. Um, with that said, you do you still offer psychic readings? Is that something you
I
do?
do. And I'd
Cool.
love to offer you or any of your listeners. I have a half hour reading and an hour reading. And
hmm
if you want to just reach out and say you heard me on Andrew's show, and pay for a half hour, and I'll give you an hour.
Very cool. Awesome. Okay. Very cool. And then how do they connect with you? What's the best website to get a hold of you and see your information?
Barbara with WITH, like the preposition,
hmm
barbarawith.com. And
hmm
I've got a conflict revolution challenge where I've got a free download to learn the very basics of it. And then also it's like a 12-week workbook
hmm
if you want to actually get serious and do it in your life, and you have a chance to keep track of all the miracles that you can create.
Ah, very cool. Yeah, I'll make sure I link that below so people can easily get to that and check everything out that you offer. I just want to offer at the very end, I always like to kind of give a little bit of space. If you don't want to use it, that's fine. But if you do, is there anything that, excuse me, that we didn't talk about that might seem important to share? Or do you have any final message you just want to share with the audience?
I just want people not to underestimate how important doing this inner work is.
Mm,
I know that things are crazy. I'm headed over to Europe in the middle of what looks like
mm.
World War III.
Yeah.
You
Yep.
know, things are looking really crazy out there. But I think that this work, this inner work that we sometimes feel is so fruitless, is not.
Mm.
And I'm hoping that Einstein and the party and the angels and the psychic sorority can inspire people to have this new perspective, because this is
Hmm.
my mission for the rest of my natural life, is
Yeah.
to look for the participation of the willing
Hmm.
to take part in this worldwide nonviolent action to end the age of war. And let's
Mm.
start inside, between the war between our head and our heart. And
Right.
as we build that on small levels, it grows together. And compassion is the greatest power on the
Mm.
planet.
That's awesome. I love that. That's perfect. That's a great way to end this. Barbara, I just want to say thank you for coming on the show and just sharing your time and energy and your experiences and your wisdom. I appreciate you coming on the show today.
Well, thanks for having me, Andrew. I'll come back anytime.
Awesome. Sounds good. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning into another episode. We'll see you next time. Take care.